Chapter 11, Cornfield Bottoms. They hunt people who run off from the masters, human flesh and blood. Hunting you and me ain't no different than trapping animals to them. I'll fight till I'm dead and gone. Harrison's words tumbled through my mind as we crept down the dark hillside toward the cornfield bottoms and the scattering of lights that Harrison called the River Jordan. We walked carefully, the way deer slip through the woods, placing each foot softly in front of the other, freezing at the smallest sound. The snap of a twig, a clattering of stones, a dry whisper of leaves. In the middle of the hillside, I stopped and stared at a shadow in front of us, thinking it was a patroller. He was crouched behind a clump of low bushes, with a rifle sitting across his knees and a dog curled up at his feet. My heart pounded. "You see something?" Harrison held tight on my arms, breathing fast. "Over there," I said, nodding. As the moon came out of the clouds, Harrison shook his head and whispered, "Ain't nothing there, just a tree." But in the darkness, everything looked strange and mean, as if the whole hillside was trying to catch us. I was jumpy as spit on a hot skillet as we crept down through the real thin patch of small trees. The moonlight slipped in and out of the pale clouds, playing tricks. Branches stuck out like rifles. Low bushes looked like bloodhounds ready to spring. "I don't like this at all." Harrison's voice shook. "Not at all." And then we nearly stepped onto the ashes of a still smoking fire. "Get down!" Harrison hissed as we dove to the ground. A broken clay pipe, a few chicken bones, not even burned yet, lay scattered in the glowing embers right in front of us. A pile of kindling and leaves awaited nearby, ready to be stuck in the fire. A man's glove rested on one of the warm stones. Me and Harrison didn't stay to see another thing. On our hands and knees, we crawled slowly toward the dark cornfield ahead, not saying a word until the cornstalk swallowed us up. Breathing hard and listening to the sound of our own thumping hearts, me and Harrison lay face down among the tangled legs of corn. Who'd built that fire? Were they patrollers? Hunters? Were they lying in wait for runaways? Or hiding somewhere in the cornfield right here? Motioning for me to follow him, Harrison stood up, began to creep further away from the fire. Softly, he pushed the scratchy cornstalks aside with his hands, going down row after row, as if he was moving through deep water. Above the scratching of the corn rows, I could hear far off noises, a gunshot echoing, a woman's voice hollering, a dog barking, a cow bell. But near us, everything stayed still and empty. Not a living soul around us, it seemed like. The land had become flat as a tabletop, just as Harrison had said, and as we walked and crawled in the darkness, my feet pressed into clods of soft, damp-smelling earth. Mosquitoes buzzed in my ears, but I was listening so hard for the sound of white folks or dogs that I didn't notice the river until we were almost on top of it. Even then, I didn't hear the sound of it. The cornstalks just fell away to a rippling field of black and silver in front of us. "Lord Almighty," Harrison said softly, sinking down to his knees on the grassy riverbank. "We found the River Jordan." The river in front of me and Harrison was nothing like the one in Lily's stories. I stared at the water, not believing my eyes. The river was as deep and black as the night sky, and the pinprick row of lights on the other side looked as far off as the old moon itself. Right then, I knew we had come to the end of our running away from Master Hackley, because it was plain to see, no matter how far we walked along that wide river, we would never find a place to cross it. But Harrison didn't seem to realize that there was nowhere to go. Digging through the tow sack, he pulled out the tin barn lantern. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Where do you think?" And he said, calm as anything, "I'm going into the river." My heart pounded as I watched the light of his lantern with a sulfur stick and make his way slowly down the river bank. Then, without turning around or saying a word, he lifted up the lantern and walked straight into the water. I'm ashamed to say I squeezed my eyes shut. After that, I believed, sure as anything, that he was going to keep on walking until he sank slowly below the dark water. First his legs, next his chest, then his shoulders and his head, and finally the glow of the lantern, all swallowed up by the River Jordan. "Samuel!" he hissed loudly. "Samuel!" I opened one eye. Harrison stood waist deep in the black water. "Don't just stand there, like you's turned to stone. What's got a hold of you? Get yourself out here in this river with me." "I can't go cross the river like that, Harrison," I tried to tell him. "Who says?" Harrison flapped his arms like wings above the water, and the lantern bobbled crazily up and down in the darkness. "You and me's gonna turn into owls and fly away." Holding the lantern high in one hand and cupping his other hand with his mouth, Harrison gave out a loud hoot that echoed across the water. "Hoo! Hoo! Hoo! Hoo!" All the skin on my arms rose up with goose flesh, because I knew Harrison had gone out of his head. He had fallen into a fit at the sight of the wide river that we couldn't cross, and he was in delirium. He was going to get us caught. "Hoo! Hoo! Hoo! Hoo!" Harrison turned and hollered again, loud as a drunken man. "Harrison!" I called out soft. "Come back here!" I held my breath and waited for the white folks to spring out of the cornfields and barrel down the river toward us. "Hoo! Hoo! Hoo! Hoo!" Harrison kept on, not paying any mind. "You hear them owls answering me, Samuel?" He waded into the shallower water near the riverbank. "I keep on listening. I ain't heard a thing yet. How about you?" "There's nothing out there. You just imagining things," I said, shaking my head and feeling downright sick inside because I knew there was no owls coming to carry us across that river. Only Harrison's mixed up mind. "Stop hollering like that. Come out of that water now," I begged. "Hush! I believe I just heard an owl, child." Harrison put his fingers to his lips, looked up at the sky, and he turned his head this way and that way, as if he was expecting owls to come flying over at any moment. Sinking down among the tangled weeds along the riverbank, I hugged my knees to my chest. What would Lily tell me to do with this trouble? What would she say to do about Harrison being all out of his head, the cornfields being full of patrollers, and the river being too wide to cross? The river water slapped against the shore as the wind came up. It made me think of Lily slapping the water out of the clothes when she washed them. Her hair would be all tied up in a yellowhead wrap, and her rolled-up sleeves would look like thick rings of dough around each arm. She would heave a sigh and say, "You got yourself in a mess of trouble this time, Samuel, and a whole washtub of water ain't going to make it come clean, that's for sure." And then I heard another sound. Close by, an owl called soft and low. Only this time it wasn't Harrison. Chapter 12, The Riverman. "Hallelujah!" Harrison whispered, swinging the lantern back and forth high above the dark water. "The river owl has come for us. Get the tow sack and get moving, Samuel." He splashed out of the water toward me. I squinted into the darkness, trying to see what strange kind of bird was coming to save us, even though I knew it was downright foolish. I conjured up a big picture of a silver owl flapping across the River Jordan and plucking us from the river bank just as a crowd of white patrollers burst out of the cornfields with their dogs and guns. But what come out of the darkness was not an owl at all. As we stood on the riverbank, an old rowboat slid out of the shadows. In the moonlight, I could see the silver ripple of its oars on the water, and the dark shape of someone sitting in the middle. The way the shape looked, whoever was sitting there in the boat was big, powerful big. "Go on, help him, Samuel," Harrison whispered. Raising the lantern for light, he pointed toward the water's edge. "There, where I was standing. See?" The riverboat drew nearer to us, and I could see that it was a colored man's arms pulling hard on the oars. But as the boat slid into the mud bank, I noticed something strange about those arms. White marks and lines all over 'em, and patches of white skin, like my scar, covered the large hands wrapped around the oars. Without turning around, the riverman swung the oars into the boat, stood up slowly. Seemed as if he didn't just stand up, he rose up, like haunts do. His shadow unfolded from the little rowboat, getting bigger and bigger. I drew in my breath. One leg stepped down into the river, making a ripple in the water, and then the other. The man held the side of the rowboat and turned to face us, and my heart stopped dead inside me. Lines cut across the colored man's whole face. It looked as if someone had stitched together pieces of his skin. White scars ran from his mouth to the right eye, then from his lower lip to his chin, from his eyebrow across his wide brown forehead. And as I stared at him, the pieces seemed to all shift and move. In the flickering glow of Harrison's lantern, white teeth became eyes, and a cheek sagged into his skin. One nose became two, broken lips moved together, and a scar made a strange half-smile. Then the man spoke. Sounded like deep thunder rumbling. "Not a night for some black boy to be wandering around this White River." The man fixed his eyes on me, especially without a way to get himself across. My tongue felt as if it turned to ashes. The riverman's dark eyes shifted to Harrison, who hadn't moved from where he stood, still holding the lantern up in the air. "You trying to get across this river too, old man?" "Don't know," Harrison answered, his voice hardly above a whisper, staring at the man's face. He took an unsteady step back, breathing loud. "You don't know," the man repeated. "Skin as black as earth, body bent over from doing white folks' work all your life, and you don't know what you're running from, old man?" With a deep rolling chuckle to himself, the riverman reached for something in the bottom of the rowboat, something hidden in the shadows. Even before he quickly raised it and pointed, I saw what it was. My heart roared in my ears. A pistol. "You listen to me now, or I'll leave you just where you are and save myself. You hear?" The man's voice rumbled. "I don't have time for no confused old man and a chicken-hearted boy. You want to cross this river with me, or not, old man?" He leveled the gun at Harrison. Trembling voice, Harrison said he did. "And you?" The man stared at me with his scarred, ruined face. I nodded my head, not daring to open my mouth, not even daring to breathe. "All right, then." The riverman waved his pistol at me and Harrison. "This is for folks who don't do what I tell them to do. Don't move fast enough. Don't keep hush enough. Understand? I got a price on my head, 10 times the price of yours. And your death doesn't mean near as much to me as mine. Understand?" "So get in." The man pointed the pistol at Harrison. "You first." Like a wooden toy, Harrison moved stiffly through the water and climbed into the front of the boat. He sat down on the seat and folded his hands like he was praying. "Get the tow sack and climb in, Samuel," Harrison said, looking down. "Ain't nothing to be scared of." But I could tell he didn't believe a word. And when I climbed in the boat, I saw why. There on the man's seat lay an unsheathed knife, as long as my arm, on the floor of the little rowboat, resting a black-handled club. And if this wasn't trouble enough, we had hardly left the riverbank when a woman's scream split the air.